Welcome to 365 Christian Men, where every day we aim to inspire and encourage with real-life stories about men. January 7th, Gus Patterson. Gus had always been an athlete and a man who likes a challenge. In 2017, on the cusp of turning 40, he entered a 5K race, and he won. Clearly, the time had come to run a half marathon. Gus was all in. The training schedule was intense, and that's how he liked it. Gus liked to win, and winning demanded consistently training with long runs. So that's what he did. Even if he had to run after he put the kids to bed, Gus was dedicated to the process. He never made excuses. He just did what it took to win. That's where today's story begins.
Run to win or live to build others up. Choose the better thing. For their 17th anniversary, Gus and Ruby wanted to do something together, and running a half marathon together would be ideal. While Gus's goal was to win, Ruby's goal was simply not to die. They trained for 3 months, running 13 miles on mostly flat terrain. Gus was killing it. He had hit his goal to run an 8-minute mile. Ruby was averaging a steady 12-minute mile. Race day was cool, the trail mostly shaded, and Gus was ready to run the race of his life. As they started off, Gus saw that Ruby was giving it her all, but the course was much more rigorous than either of them had anticipated. The race pamphlet mentioned rolling bluffs. No problem, right? Turns out, rolling bluffs is code for steep, sandy hills. It was much harder than the flat terrain they'd practiced on. Gus was fine with it, but it was clobbering Ruby. He kept looking back. She was really struggling back there, but he needed to press on. This was his race. But he couldn't abandon her, so he slowed down and hung back and stayed with her until they got to the first water station at the 5-mile mark. He would make sure she was strong enough to handle the other 8 miles on her own. With 8 miles left, he'd be able to make up the time. Ruby said she knew how important winning this race was for him, and he should just go ahead. She would wait for him at the aid station. But Gus knew Ruby was capable, and he wanted her to see it too. Seeing her gain confidence was worth more to him than winning any race. Through the next 8 miles, Gus ran ahead of Ruby and pointed out potential tripping hazards and paced her. Gus ran as fast as he could to the top of the big hill and jumped up and down and cheered, "Come on, Ruby, you got this. You're almost there." Ruby said she felt as if she were dying, and she couldn't understand where Gus was finding all this superhuman strength. He saw that his exuberance was encouraging her, but once in a while she did look a little ticked off too. Every time she wanted to give up, he reminded her of how proud he was of her and what a pleasure it was to be able to do this together. The more fatigued she got, the more Gus just wanted to be there for her. He ran back to meet her at the bottom of the hill, but this time he decided to run behind her. "Ruby, you can do this, and I'm not going anywhere. We started together, and we're going to finish together." His voice behind her in the open space ahead gave her the chance to set the pace. Gus knew that's what she needed. He was okay with letting Ruby set the pace. Ruby was always kind of bossy anyhow, and that's what made him fall in love with her to begin with. Finally, on flat ground and just 1 more mile to go, Gus pulled beside Ruby and grabbed her hand. But Ruby told Gus, "Finish strong, you go on, I can't run anymore." And Gus, with all the patience in the world, held her hand tighter and said, "Together, Ruby, we finish together." 2 Corinthians 13:10 says, "This is why I write these things when I am absent, that when I come, I may not have to be harsh in my use of authority, the authority the Lord gave me for building you up, not for tearing you down." Who can you run alongside this week who needs your encouragement? Can you use your strengths to help someone else find theirs? Run to win or live to build others up. Choose the better thing.
Thank you for listening to today's story. Every day of the year, our hope is to inspire you with real-life stories of faithful men who have gone before us. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." Join us tomorrow for another story at 365christianmen.com.